Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, the fog over Sablewind Pier hides more than the restless tide. A lifeless body has been found beneath its ancient wooden planks, and every wave seems to whisper a sinister truth. But fear not, Hercule Poirot is here. With his brilliant little gray cells and unmatched intuition, he steps into the mist to unveil the secrets the pier is trying so hard to keep. Settle in, let the tide pull you deeper, and allow the shadows of Sablewind Pier to guide you into a chilling mystery. Thank you for joining us. Let the investigation begin. Chapter 1. The Body Beneath the Pier. The fog rolled in from the sea like a living creature, slow, white, and unyielding, wrapping itself around the wooden planks of Sablewind Pier until the entire structure seemed suspended between sea and sky. The early morning air was dense with salt and cold enough to sting. Seagulls circled above, their cries sharp and restless, as though warning the village of the tragedy waiting beneath the water-soaked beams. Hercule Poirot stepped carefully along the narrow pier, his polished shoes making small, crisp sounds against the wet wood. His mustache, immaculate as always, stood firm against the biting sea breeze. He examined the surroundings with quiet intensity. Every detail counted. Every whisper of the wind held potential meaning. Inspector Graves of the Sablewind Constabulary waited near the edge, shifting uneasily from foot to foot. He was a stout man with a thick jaw and a manner better suited for shouting at crowds than handling delicate mysteries. "Morning, Monsieur Poirot," Graves muttered, rubbing his gloved hands together. "Didn't expect the great detective to answer our summons so quickly." Poirot inclined his head. "I was already in the region, mon ami. Your message sounded urgent, and if there is one thing I cannot ignore, it is a murder by the sea. The tides, they wash away clues faster than a careless maid wipes a table." Graves sighed and pointed beneath the pier. "It's under here. Follow me." They descended the narrow staircase beside the pier, each step slick with moisture and shadowed by the wooden beams above. As they reached the rocky shoreline, Poirot paused. There, half submerged where the waves kissed the stones, lay the body of Thomas Bellamy, a respected local merchant known for his charitable donations and devoted family. His eyes stared blankly upward, reflecting the fog. His coat was torn, and there was a deep wound on the side of his head. Poirot crouched beside the body, examining the position of the limbs, the expression frozen on Bellamy's face, the scattered footprints leading toward the pier. "Tell me," Poirot said softly, "who discovered him?" "A fisherman. Around 4 in the morning." Graves exhaled shakily. "Bellamy's family is in shock. He was supposed to return home last night after a business meeting. Never did." Poirot's hand brushed the stones beneath the victim. "Look here, Inspector," he murmured. "There is no sign the body was washed ashore by accident. The tide moves outward at night, n'est-ce pas?" Graves frowned. "Correct. Low tide between midnight and 4. Then he did not drift here." "He was placed here." Poirot stood, brushing off his knees. "And the wound?" He touched his temple lightly. "Not consistent with slipping or drowning. This is a blow from a blunt object delivered with purpose. The inspector shifted uncomfortably. "So, we're calling it murder." Poirot turned to him sharply. "My dear Inspector, it is not I who calls it murder. It is the facts that scream it." The waves crashed harder now, as though trying to claim the truth before Poirot could reach it. Poirot continued his walk beneath the pier beams. He paused suddenly near a broken plank lying crooked against a support post. He bent to examine it. Fresh break, he noted. Splintered outward. Someone either fell or fought against this section. He raised his lantern and noticed something else, a faint smear of dark red along the jagged edge. Poirot nodded to himself. "Bon, it begins to speak." Graves groaned. "Every time you say that, my day gets worse." But Poirot ignored him instead. He studied the sand near the waterline, tracking the direction of several footprints, some deep, some barely visible beneath the settling fog. "One set enters," Poirot whispered, "but none leave." Graves blinked. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Poirot said, "that the killer did not walk back out. He remained or escaped by another route." He pointed toward the end of the pier, where the fog hung thick enough to hide a man completely. "And perhaps he is someone who knows this pier better than most." Up above, the village began to stir. Lanterns lit one by one, villagers waking to whispers of death. The old innkeeper watched from his window. The baker's apprentice peeked from behind crates, and a fisherman paused mid-task. Crossing himself, Poirot climbed the stairs back onto the pier, turning his gaze out toward the water. His mind raced. Why was Bellamy here? Who knew he would be here? What secret did Sablewind Pier hold beneath its fog-covered planks? As Poirot pondered, a tall figure approached, a woman wrapped in a wool coat, her expression tense. "Mr. Poirot?" She called softly. Poirot turned. "I am Eleanor Bellamy," she whispered, eyes glistening. "Thomas was my husband." Poirot bowed respectfully. "Madame, I am deeply sorry." She swallowed hard. "Please, find who did this. Thomas would never go near the pier at night. Someone lured him here." Poirot nodded. "Then that is where we begin." He watched her walk away, shoulders trembling. The fog thickened again. Poirot turned back toward the pier, voice barely above a whisper. "Whoever killed Thomas Bellamy, you are hiding here, somewhere in the shadows. But Hercule Poirot will find you, even if the sea helps you bury your secrets." The wind howled across the pier, carrying with it the faintest echo of footsteps, then silence. Poirot stood alone, the waves crashing beneath him. The mystery of Sablewind Pier had begun. Chapter 2: Whispers among the fisherfolk. The morning fog had barely thinned when Hercule Poirot made his way toward the fishing quarter of Sablewind village. Boats rocked gently along the harbor, their ropes creaking like old bones. Nets hung drying on wooden frames, dripping seawater that glimmered in the pale dawn light. The scent of salt tar and freshly caught mackerel mixed in the air, an aroma familiar to the villagers, but foreign to Poirot's refined senses. He paused, observing the environment with the careful precision of a surgeon. A fisherman pulled up a crate of oysters. Another mended a torn net. A group of elderly men, their skin weathered by decades on the sea, smoked pipes while whispering among themselves. The village appeared peaceful, but beneath the surface, Poirot sensed tension. He approached Fisherman Rowan, a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard and a permanent scowl etched across his brow. Rowan looked up suspiciously as Poirot stopped before him. "You're the detective." Rowan grunted. "Oui, monsieur," Poirot replied gently. "And you are the man who found the body beneath the pier." Rowan exhaled a long breath, as though he had been dreading this moment. "I found him at 4 in the morning. Thought it was driftwood at first. Then I saw the hand." Poirot nodded. "Tell me everything, s'il vous plaît, from the beginning." Rowan rubbed his hands on his trousers. "I come early every day. Tide's best then. Fog was thicker than usual. I saw something caught between the rocks. I went closer and saw his coat. Fine coat. Too fine for someone wandering at night." Poirot leaned in. "Anything else? Footprints? Shadows? A sound, perhaps?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "A sound, yes. Now that you say it." He glanced nervously toward the pier. "A footstep. Not mine, behind me. But when I turned, nothing was there. Just the fog." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Aha! And this footstep, it was close?" "Very," Rowan whispered. Poirot looked toward the pier, the beams disappearing into an ocean of mist. "Monsieur Rowan, whoever killed Thomas Bellamy may have been watching you at that very moment." Rowan swallowed. Poirot left him trembling and moved toward another fisherman, Mara Quinn, a wiry woman with sharp eyes who commanded respect on the docks. "You knew Thomas Bellamy, Nan?" Poirot asked. Mara snorted. "Everybody knew him. He bought supplies from us all. But not everyone liked him. And you, madame?" Poirot tilted his head. She hesitated. "He had debts. Big ones. Not gambling, no. Bellamy wasn't the type. But business. Investments gone wrong. He owed money to half the village." Poirot folded his arms. "Interesting. Inspector Graves did not mention this." "Because Graves doesn't know," Mara said. "Bellamy kept it quiet. But creditors don't stay quiet forever." Poirot turned his gaze toward the sea. "Debts create motives. Desperation creates opportunity." Mara lowered her voice. "One more thing. The night he died, someone saw him." Poirot focused. "Who?" She leaned in close. "The lighthouse keeper, old Calder. He said he saw 2 figures walking toward Sablewind Pier before midnight." Poirot's heartbeat quickened just a little. "2? Not 1? Mara nodded. 2, but he couldn't see their faces. Fog comes down heavy after dark." Poirot thanked her and continued his walk, thoughts moving swiftly like wind across water. Thomas Bellamy had no business being on the pier at night. Yet he had come. Willingly? Or under threat? Poirot's polished shoes clicked rhythmically as he made his way toward the Seashell Inn, the village's only tavern. Inside, warm light spilled from lanterns, illuminating wooden tables worn smooth by decades of conversations and secrets. As Poirot entered, the room fell silent. Villagers stared, some with curiosity, some with fear, some with guilt. Poirot approached the counter where Lydia Marsh, the innkeeper, stood polishing a glass. "Bonjour, madame," Poirot greeted politely. Lydia forced a smile. "Detective, what brings you here?" Poirot studied her face, eyes tired, lips pressed tightly. She was nervous. "Very nervous, madame. You were one of the last people to see Thomas Bellamy alive." The glass slipped slightly in her hands. Poirot continued softly. "He came here last night." "At what time?" "Around 9, she whispered. "Ordered tea, looked troubled." Poirot stepped closer. "And did he speak to anyone?" She hesitated. "Yes, he spoke to." The door slammed open, and a tall man burst in. "Lydia." He barked, "You keep your mouth shut." Poirot turned sharply. The man, broad shoulders, thick coat. Dark eyes glared with hostility. "And you," he growled at Poirot. "Stay out of our business." Poirot's expression remained calm, but inside his little gray cells danced. "Your name?" "Monsieur?" Poirot asked politely. The man stepped closer. "Samuel Hargreaves." Poirot recognized it instantly. A creditor. One of Bellamy's most aggressive lenders. Poirot smiled gently. "Ah, then perhaps you can tell me why you threatened Madame Lydia just now?" Hargreaves stiffened. "She talks too much." Poirot's eyes twinkled softly. "Or perhaps, monsieur, she knows something that frightens you." Murmurs rippled through the room. Hargreaves clenched his fists. "I've got nothing to hide." Poirot nodded. "Good. Then you will not object when I speak with Madame Lydia." "Alone." Hargreaves stormed out of the inn, slamming the door so hard it rattled the lanterns. Poirot turned back to Lydia, who looked pale. "You were saying, madame?" "Bellamy spoke to whom?" Lydia swallowed. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "He spoke to someone he feared, someone who threatened him." Poirot leaned in. "A name, madame." She trembled. "It was Samuel Hargreaves." Poirot felt the first threads of truth weaving together, but the fog outside thickened again. And somewhere out on Sablewind Pier, someone watched. Chapter 3. The footprints that should not exist. The fog had grown thicker by the hour, curling across Sablewind Pier like long white fingers that refused to release their grip. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the weathered planks, eyes narrowed, glancing back and forth between the shoreline and the wooden beams above him. Something about this crime nagged at him more than usual, not just its brutality, but the eerie silence that surrounded it. Silence held secrets, and Sablewind Pier was drowning in them. Poirot crouched again near the rocks where Thomas Bellamy's body had been found. The tide was rising now, but enough remained for Poirot to trace faint impressions in the wet sand. He leaned forward, balancing perfectly as only Poirot could. There, a set of footprints. They had been overlooked earlier in the commotion, but now, in the shifting fog, they appeared more clearly. Deep impressions heading toward the pier. and none returning. Poirot's mind stirred. No man walks into the sea without leaving a path back, Poirot murmured, unless he leaves by other means, or unless he is carried. He followed the footprints slowly, each step precise, each detail absorbed. The prints were heavy, spaced confidently. A strong man. Not Bellamy's shoes were finer, narrower, the gait more delicate. Poirot knew these differences instinctively. The trail ended at a barnacle-covered piling beneath the pier. Here, the sand became disturbed, as if two bodies had struggled. Poirot traced the swirl of displaced pebbles, the slashing of seaweed, and the scattered grains of grit. A struggle took place here, Poirot whispered, but quietly, efficiently, as though the killer knew how to silence him quickly. A sudden voice broke the stillness. "You shouldn't be here." Poirot lifted his head. A slender woman stood above him, leaning over the pier railing. Her hair was tied back under a scarf, her coat worn but clean. Recognition dawned. Evelyn Shore, a schoolteacher and one of the villagers who had always lived in the shadow of Sablewind Pier. But her expression today seemed heavier. Burdened by knowledge she hesitated to share, Poirot climbed the small wooden ladder to reach the pier's top, dusting his coat as he approached her. "Mademoiselle Shore," Poirot said gently, "you know something." Evelyn's eyes darted left and right. "I don't want trouble." "I am not the trouble," Poirot said softly. "The trouble is already here. A man is dead, and you, mademoiselle, stand with the look of one who has seen something." She swallowed, hands trembling around the strap of her satchel. I heard voices last night." Poirot's brow rose. "Voices, mademoiselle?" "Yes. I was returning home late from tutoring lessons. I always cross the pier on my way back." Poirot waited. At the far end, she hesitated, lowering her voice. I heard an argument. A man shouting, and another begging. Bellamy's voice. I recognized it. Poirot leaned closer. "You are certain?" Her nod was sharp. "Absolutely." He was yelling something like, "You promised, and I can't pay you any more." Poirot's mind clicked rapidly into motion. Samuel Hargreaves had threatened Lydia in the inn. Bellamy owed money across the village. Now Evelyn Shore confirmed the argument. But there was more. "And the other man," Poirot said. "Did you hear him clearly?" "I heard his anger, his fury, but not his name. He spoke sharply, low voice. He said Bellamy knew the consequences if he failed again." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Did you see anything?" Her breath tightened. "Only a lantern swinging in the fog, and shadows. 2 figures, one tall, the other smaller." Poirot felt the first firm piece of the puzzle lock in place. Bellamy had come to meet his creditor. Someone he feared. Someone strong. Poirot studied Evelyn carefully. "Why did you not tell the inspector?" Evelyn looked away. "People here protect each other. Outsiders asking questions. It never ends well." Poirot's expression softened. "But I am not entirely an outsider. I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here only for the truth." Evelyn hesitated, then finally whispered, There's something else. Poirot leaned in. Yes, a third person was there. Poirot stiffened. A third? She nodded. I saw someone standing farther down the pier, watching, not moving. Just watching the argument. Poirot's heartbeat quickened suddenly. A witness? An accomplice? Or the killer himself? And this third person, could you tell who it was? No, she shook her head. The fog swallowed them. But they left before the argument exploded. Poirot drew in a long, slow breath. If there was a third witness, Poirot murmured, they may hold the key to everything. A voice called from the shore. Detective. Inspector Graves jogged toward them, boots thudding loudly. Poirot braced himself. What is it, mon ami? He asked. Your hunch was right, Graves panted. Bellamy didn't come to the pier alone. We found a torn piece of fabric caught on a nail near the pier entrance. Expensive fabric. Dark blue. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Bellamy's? No, Bellamy's coat was brown. Graves held up the fabric. This came from someone else. Poirot examined it. High-quality wool. Tailored stitching. Someone of means. Someone who dressed well. Someone who walked with confidence along the pier. Believing no one saw him, Poirot turned to Graves. Have you questioned Samuel Hargreaves? Graves shook his head. He's disappeared. Poirot closed his eyes briefly. The guilty flee even before they are accused. But Poirot was not convinced Hargreaves was the killer. Too convenient. Too visible. Poirot suspected deeper forces at play. Inspector, Poirot said calmly, send men to search the village for Hargreaves. But discreetly, not loudly. Graves nodded and left quickly. Poirot turned once more to Evelyn. But she had vanished, too, slipping away like a ghost into the fading fog. Poirot stood alone on Sablewind Pier, listening to the sea crash below. 3 men had been present during the argument. 2 had spoken. 1 had watched. Bellamy had begged for mercy. The killer had struck with precision, and the witness, silent, hidden, had disappeared. Poirot touched the railing thoughtfully. Sablewind Pier. He whispered, you hide too many shadows. But Hercule Poirot will not allow shadows to remain shadows. None. They must become light. As he walked away from the pier, something glinted on the wooden planks. Poirot bent, picked it up, and held it to the light. A cufflink silver dot engraved with a single letter, R. Poirot smiled faintly. Bon, he murmured. Now the hunt begins. Fog curled around him as he stepped toward the village, the mystery deepening with every breath. Chapter 4. The cufflink with the letter R. The silver cufflink felt cold in Poirot's palm, as though it still carried the chill of the night's murder. The engraved letter R shimmered faintly despite the heavy fog clinging to Sablewind Pier. Poirot held it up toward the pale morning light, turning it between his fingers like a delicate puzzle piece. R. He whispered, a small letter for a large meaning. Who in the village wore cufflinks? Certainly not the fisherman most barely owned a second shirt, nor the children, nor the elderly women who sold shells along the pier. No cufflinks belong to men of means, men of influence, men who dressed with precision, perhaps even vanity. Poirot tucked the cufflinks safely into his pocket and walked briskly toward the village center. The wooden pier groaning behind him like an old man recalling a memory he wished to forget as he neared the cobbled square. He spotted Inspector Graves waving frantically. "Poirot! There you are!" Graves puffed, racing across the square. "We've found something, or rather, someone." Poirot raised a brow. "Ah, Monsieur Hargreaves?" "Ah, Monsieur Hargreaves?" Graves shook his head. "Not him. Someone else. A man who says he saw Bellamy last night." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Another witness? Where is this man?" "In the old boathouse by the east shore," Graves said nervously. "Said he'd only talk to you. Insisted." Poirot's mustache twitched upward. "Bon, lead the way." They walked along the narrow path, hugging the coastline, the waves crashing violently against dark rocks below. At the edge of the cliffs crouched an abandoned boathouse, its paint peeling, its windows darkened, its door hanging crookedly on rusted hinges. Inside, a man sat hunched on a crate, his coat wrapped tightly around him. He was young, no more than 25, with windswept hair and frightened eyes that darted around the room as though hunted by invisible shadows. Poirot approached gently. "Monsieur." "Your name?" "Robert," the man stammered. "Robert Finch." Poirot lowered himself onto a nearby barrel. "Monsieur Finch, I understand you saw something last night." Robert swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have been there. I couldn't sleep. I walk the pier when my mind's unsettled." Poirot nodded, inviting him to continue. "I saw Bellamy," Robert whispered, wringing his hands. "He was arguing with someone tall, someone strong. They were shouting, well, the tall one was." Bellamy looked terrified. Poirot leaned forward. "Did you recognize the tall man?" Robert hesitated too long. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Monsieur Finch." "The truth. All of it." Robert's voice cracked. I think it was Samuel Hargreaves." Inspector Graves exploded. "I knew it. That thug." Poirot raised a hand calmly. "None. We do not leap to conclusions. Continue, monsieur." Robert nodded shakily. "Bellamy begged for one more chance. He said he'd have the money soon. The tall man grabbed him, shoved him against the rail. I thought he was going to kill him right there." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "But he did not kill him there. This we know." "No," Robert agreed, voice trembling. "Bellamy broke free and ran. The tall man followed." Poirot's mind raced. So far, everything aligned. "Did you see a third person?" Poirot asked. Robert hesitated again. Poirot's voice softened. "It is important, monsieur." Robert took a deep breath. "Yes. Someone was standing farther along the pier, watching, not helping. Just watching." Poirot nodded slowly. "Exactly what Evelyn Shore had said. Could you identify this silent observer?" Poirot asked. Robert shook his head. "Too foggy, but He bit his lip. They weren't tall. Medium height. Moved quietly. Poirot tapped a finger against his knee. A second witness confirming the same third presence. But why, Poirot murmured, would this silent watcher not intervene? Unless he stood abruptly. Inspector, we must find Hargreaves at once. Graves nodded. Already searching. Poirot turned toward Robert. Merci, monsieur. You have helped more than you know. Robert exhaled shakily, relief washing over him. Poirot stepped outside the boathouse and looked toward the restless waves. Something is not right, he whispered. Not right at all. A sudden gust of wind caught his coat as though urging him forward, and Poirot obeyed. Chapter 5. The man who ran from his past Poirot moved through Sablewind village with swift steps, his mind spinning like the gears of a finely crafted watch. The morning fog had thinned slightly, giving him clearer glimpses of stone houses, crooked chimneys, and suspicious eyes peeking through curtains. Hargreaves. Samuel Hargreaves. The man with the violent temper. The man Bellamy feared. The man who threatened Lydia Marsh, in full view of Poirot, and now the man who had suddenly vanished. Poirot approached the Seashell Inn. Lydia Marsh stood outside, sweeping the steps with trembling hands. Her face paled when she saw Poirot. He came back, Lydia whispered. Poirot stepped closer. Hargreaves? She nodded. Not long after you left. He looked furious, kept muttering to himself. Poirot frowned. And where is he now? He stormed off toward the cliffs, Lydia said. Said something about ending this once and for all. Poirot stiffened. Show me. They hurried along the winding path to the cliffside. Waves crashed against jagged rocks below, spraying white foam into the air. The wind whipped fiercely, making it dangerous to stand near the edge. Poirot scanned the landscape.footprints.deep ones, heading toward the highest point of the cliff. Poirot followed swiftly, coat flapping violently. Behind him, Lydia called out, "Be careful." But Poirot had no time for caution. The footprints grew fresher, sharper, until he saw him. Samuel Hargreaves, standing dangerously close to the cliff edge, fists clenched, chest heaving. Hargreaves. Poirot shouted. Hargreaves didn't turn. Leave me be. Poirot stepped forward cautiously. Monsieur, murder is not erased by throwing oneself into the sea. Hargreaves finally spun around, eyes wild. I didn't kill him. I swear it. Poirot held his gaze. Then why run? Because this village wants someone to blame, Hargreaves snapped. And I'm the easiest target. Poirot stepped closer. Monsieur Hargreaves. Did you argue with Bellamy last night? Yes, Hargreaves shouted. He owed me money. A lot of it. And he kept promising he'd pay. But I didn't kill him. Poirot's eyes twinkled with sharp alertness. Then who did? Hargreaves shook his head violently. I don't know. After he ran off, I followed him for a bit, but then the fog got too thick. I lost him. Poirot's voice softened. Did you see a third person on the pier? Hargreaves froze, then slowly. He nodded. Yes. he whispered. Someone was there, watching us, but I couldn't see their face. Poirot nodded. Merci, monsieur. You may step back from the edge now. Hargreaves hesitated, then moved away from danger. Poirot's mind sharpened like a blade. 3 witnesses, 3 identical accounts, 3 confirmations that someone else had been present. So why had this unknown third person remained silent? Why watch a man die and say nothing? Poirot felt the first true spark of fear, not for himself, but for the truth. For the first time, he sensed the killer was not merely violent, but strategic. He turned to Hargreaves. Go home, monsieur. Cooperate with the inspector. Do not leave the village. Hargreaves nodded and walked away slowly. Poirot stood, alone against the roaring wind. The fog curled around him like a serpent, and inside it, he felt eyes watching. Chapter 6. The letters Bellamy left behind Sablewind Pier creaked under Poirot's steps as he returned to the scene of the crime. The fog had lifted enough to reveal the coastline, but the pier still loomed like a skeletal hand stretched over the sea. Poirot approached Bellamy's home, a modest but tidy house near the harbor. The widow, Eleanor Bellamy, greeted him with red eyes and trembling hands. Please, come in, she whispered. Poirot stepped into the quiet parlor, glancing around. The room was filled with books, ledgers, and framed family photographs. But what caught Poirot's attention was a small locked drawer in Bellamy's desk. Madame, Poirot asked softly, Monsieur Bellamy's key? She handed it to him reluctantly. Poirot unlocked the drawer. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with a fraying ribbon. Poirot untied them delicately. The first letter read, If you fail again, you know what must happen. R. Poirot's heart jolted. R. The CUFFLINK. The signature. The hidden observer. The third. Presence. Poirot read another letter. Your debts are no longer the issue. It is what you have taken from me. Return it or you will suffer. R. Poirot closed the letter slowly. This is not about money, he whispered. Eleanor Bellamy clutched her shawl. What do you mean? Poirot looked at her gently. Madame, your husband was involved in something much darker than debt. She shook her head. No, Thomas was a good man. He would never. Poirot touched her arm reassuringly. A good man can make mistakes, but he does not deserve murder. Eleanor sank into a chair, tears falling silently. Poirot continued reading. One final letter chilled him. Meet me at Sablewind Pier, midnight. Bring what is mine. R. Poirot closed his eyes. Now the truth was forming. Someone had arranged to meet Bellamy. Someone who wanted something stolen. Something Bellamy had hidden. Poirot turned to Eleanor. Madame, what did your husband take? Her face went pale. Take? Nothing. Thomas never stole anything. Poirot held up the letters. Someone believed otherwise. She shook her head again, but Poirot noticed something. A flicker. A hesitation. A truth she did not want to speak. Poirot stood. Madame, think carefully. What object did your husband acquire recently? Something valuable? Secretive? Eleanor's eyes widened. Then softly she whispered, "The lighthouse logbook." Poirot froze. "The lighthouse logbook?" She nodded. "Thomas retrieved it a week ago. He said it was proof of something terrible. But he wouldn't tell me what." Poirot's heart thud and then a realization struck him with the force of a wave. The third person on the pier. The observer. The silent figure, not a villager, not a fisherman, but someone who would kill to protect the secrets of the lighthouse. Poirot stood abruptly. "Madame, lock your doors. Tell no one I was here." He stepped into the cold coastal wind. Coat whipping behind him, the lighthouse towered in the distance, standing tall against the sky like a lonely sentinel. Poirot's little gray cells were no longer whispering. They were screaming. Chapter 7. The Lighthouse Keeper's Silence. The path leading to the Sablewind lighthouse twisted sharply along the cliffside, the wind clawing at Poirot's coat as though attempting to push him back. Waves crashed violently far below, sending bursts of white spray upward. The lighthouse, ancient, weathered, and streaked with salt, stood tall against the swirling gray sky, like a lonely guardian hiding unwelcome truths. A lonely guardian hiding unwelcome truths. Poirot climbed the stone steps one by one, careful yet determined. Halfway up, he paused to study the surrounding cliffside. Footprints. Not many, but recent. Someone else had visited the lighthouse today. Poirot knocked on the heavy wooden door. A moment later, the door creaked open to reveal Calder Wexley, the lighthouse keeper, a gaunt man with deep-set eyes, weathered skin, and a beard streaked with white. The scent of oil lamps and old rope filled the air behind him. "You're the detective," Calder said, voice low and coarse. "Oui, monsieur," Poirot replied. "I understand you witnessed something the night Thomas Bellamy died." Calder's fingers twitched slightly. "Did I? Maybe. Fog plays tricks." Poirot stepped forward. "But, monsieur, your eyes sharp as they are, Miss Little." Calder's gaze flickered. Then, reluctantly, he opened the door wider. Inside, the lighthouse spiraled upward, lanterns glowing faintly against the cold stone walls. The entire space hummed with the spirit of long nights and lonely wathkeeping. Calder led Poirot to a small wooden table cluttered with charts and journals. "I hear things," Calder murmured, lighting a lamp. "The sea carries secrets." Poirot waited patiently. Calder sighed heavily. "Fine, I'll say it. I saw 3 men on the pier last night. Bellamy, angry as a storm. Hargreaves, red as a lighthouse lamp with rage. And a third." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Describe the third man." Calder hesitated, rubbing his beard. "Average height. Moved like he knew the pier well. Stood at the far end, watching." Poirot leaned forward. "Did he interact with Bellamy or Hargreaves?" "No," Calder lowered his voice. "But when the shouting grew louder, he drifted back into the fog. Cowardice?" Poirot asked. Calder shook his head. "No, it felt like planning." Poirot's mind churned. "Tell me, monsieur," Poirot said softly. "What of the lighthouse logbook?" Calder froze. Poirot continued before he could respond. It is missing. And Thomas Bellamy took it. What did that logbook contain? Calder swallowed. A sheen of sweat formed on his brow. Records, he whispered. Movements of boats, arrivals, departures, storms, warnings, things people might want forgotten. Poirot stepped closer. And, monsieur, who signs these records? Calder's lips trembled. I do. Poirot touched the cufflink in his pocket. Then perhaps, he murmured. Monsieur Calder, you can explain why a cufflink engraved with the letter R was found beneath the pier? Calder stiffened. Mine? I don't wear cufflinks. No, Poirot said slowly. But someone who has access to your lighthouse does. Calder's breathing quickened. Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. Who, monsieur? Who else enters this lighthouse? Calder's voice broke. My assistant. Rowan. Poirot felt a jolt. Rowan? Fisherman Rowan. Calder nodded. He helps maintain the lights. Logs boat activity. Comes and goes freely. Poirot's mind raced. Rowan, the man who found the body. The man who claimed to hear footsteps. The man who had seemed afraid, perhaps not of shadows, but of the truth being uncovered. Poirot stepped back. Merci, monsieur, he said quietly. You have helped more than you know. Calder sank into a chair. Trembling, Poirot left the lighthouse with the wind howling like a beast freed from its cage. Chapter 8. The fisherman whose story changed Poirot found Rowan near the harbor, tying ropes to his boat, face lined with worry. The air was sharp with the scent of fish and brine, the gulls circling overhead with loud, impatient cries. Rowan looked up as Poirot approached. Monsieur Rowan, Poirot said warmly. May we talk once more? Rowan's jaw tightened. I already told you all I know. Poirot smiled faintly. It is funny, monsieur, how memories evolve when truth begins to rise like the tide. Rowan frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Poirot stepped closer, lowering his voice. It means, monsieur, I know you were at the pier long before you claimed. I know you were not simply a passerby, and I know you were witness to far more. Rowan's eyes flared with surprise and fear. You're mistaken, he grunted. Poirot shook his head. No, I am not. He withdrew the silver cufflink and held it up. This, monsieur, was found beneath the pier. Engraved with R. Rowan. Tell me, what does the R stand for? Rowan's face paled. Poirot did not relent. You helped Calder maintain the lighthouse. You had access to the logbook Bellamy stole, and you had reason to silence Bellamy if he threatened to reveal what he had discovered. Rowan backed away. I didn't kill him. Poirot folded his arms. Did you meet him last night? Rowan's fists clenched. I met him. Yes, but I didn't touch him. He said he had something that would destroy everything. He wanted money to stay quiet. Poirot's mind churned. Blackmail, he whispered. Bellamy was blackmailing you? Rowan nodded reluctantly. Yes, but not for anything criminal. Poirot raised a brow. Rowan exhaled shakily. The lighthouse logs. They show boats coming in at strange hours. Unregistered boats. Smuggling, maybe. Not me, Calder. He made the entries. I just helped him. Bellamy found the logbook and threatened to report it unless we paid. Poirot listened carefully. And so, you planned to meet him at the pier? Rowan nodded. But I swear, when I got there, Hargreaves was already yelling at him. I stayed hidden. I didn't want to get involved. Poirot tilted his head. Then what happened next? Rowan looked haunted. Bellamy ran off. Hargreaves chased him. I stayed back. Then I heard a struggle farther beneath the pier. When I got there, Bellamy was already dead. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And did you see anyone else? Rowan hesitated. Poirot whispered, "The third man." Rowan swallowed. I saw a figure. Medium height. Didn't speak. Just turned and walked into the fog. Poirot inhaled slowly. "Rowan," he said gently, "you have not told me everything." Rowan stared at the ground, fists trembling. Then, in a voice wavering with guilt, he said, "I recognized his walk." Poirot leaned in. "Whose walk, monsieur?" Rowan closed his eyes. It was Robert Finch. Poirot froze. Robert, the frightened young man in the boathouse. The one who pretended to be terrified. The one who came forward conveniently. Poirot felt the pieces lock into place with chilling clarity. Chapter 9. The silent witness reveals his face. Poirot moved swiftly through the village, boots clicking sharply against the stone paths. The fog had thinned enough to reveal houses clearly now, chimneys smoking, windows reflecting the pale afternoon light. He made his way to the old boathouse where Robert Finch had claimed to hide earlier. But when Poirot pushed the door open, the space was empty. Utterly empty. Not a crate out of place. Not a footprint on the dusty floorboards. Gone. Poirot single quotes S eyes narrowed. Running away, he whispered, is also a confession. Poirot stepped back outside, scanning the surroundings. The harbor. The docks. The cliff path. Then he saw fresh footprints leading toward the abandoned pier shack at the far edge of Sablewind coastline. Poirot followed Dot as he reached the shack. He heard faint rustling inside. Poirot stepped inside quietly. "Robert Finch," Poirot said softly, "your performance as a frightened witness was admirable. But it ends now." A figure stepped from the shadows. Robert, but no longer frightened. No longer trembling. His posture was straight, face cold, eyes calculating. "So," Robert whispered, "you figured it out." Poirot nodded. "We," Robert smirked. "Then go on, detective. Tell me how brilliant you are." Poirot did. Bellamy discovered the lighthouse logs records of illegal nighttime shipments. Calder made the logs. Rowan helped him, but you coordinated them. Robert's jaw tightened. You watched Bellamy being blackmailed by Hargreaves. You saw Rowan hiding. You saw everyone's dirt. And you used it. Poirot stepped closer. You arranged the meeting at the pier. You let Bellamy fight with Hargreaves, thinking suspicion would fall on him. But Bellamy escaped the argument, only to meet you beneath the pier, where the fog hides all sins. Robert smirked. You have no proof, Poirot smiled gently. Perhaps. But I know something you do not. You dropped this. He revealed the cufflink. Robert's confidence flickered. Poirot continued. You wear cufflinks, monsieur. A fisherman does not. A lighthouse keeper does not. But a smuggler pretending to be a harmless young villager? He might. Robert stepped back, eyes wild. Poirot's voice lowered. You killed Bellamy with a single blow, quick, efficient. You feared he'd expose the entire operation. And then you pretended to be a frightened witness so Poirot's eyes would look away from you. Robert's breathing quickened. Poirot continued softly. But you overlooked one thing, the mind of Hercule Poirot. Robert lunged toward the door, but Inspector Graves burst in with officers. Robert froze. Robert Finch, Graves declared. You're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Bellamy. Poirot looked at Robert, eyes filled with quiet sadness. Your mistake, monsieur, was believing the fog could hide you forever. Robert glared at Poirot as the officers seized him. Poirot stepped outside the shack, breathing in the crisp ocean air. The fog was lifting. The village was waking, and the shadows of Sablewind Pier had lost their killer. Shadows of Sablewind Pier had lost their killer. Chapter 10. The Sea That Keeps No Secrets. The morning after Robert Finch's arrest, Sablewind Village felt different. It was not brighter. The sky was still layered with pale clouds, and the sea still crashed relentlessly against the dark rocks, but the air held a new kind of stillness. Not the suffocating silence of fear, but the hushed relief that follows a confession. Hercule Poirot stood once more upon Sablewind Pier, his hands resting lightly on the wooden railing. The pier creaked beneath him as the tide moved in slow rhythm below. Now that the fog had lifted, the details of the place were clearer than ever. The worn edges of the planks, the rusted nails jutting out here and there, the patches where the wood had darkened over time from salt and storms. It was not beautiful, but it was honest. Behind him, footsteps approached. Poirot. Inspector Graves called, his voice smoother than it had been in days. Thought I'd find you here. Poirot turned slightly. Graves' posture was more relaxed, though heavy with the weight of paperwork and statements waiting for him. You have charged him? Poirot asked. Graves nodded. Robert Finch, murder of Thomas Bellamy, and likely much more besides. Once we untangle the smuggling operation he's been quietly running through the lighthouse records. Ah, oui, Poirot murmured. He used the sea as his accomplice. But the sea, she is not loyal. She returns what is thrown into her arms bodies, secrets, and sometimes cufflinks. Graves chuckled weakly. I'll say this much, Poirot. I never would have suspected him. Quiet lad, polite, good with stories. Played the victim perfectly. Poirot smiled faintly. The best villains, Inspector, are often those who understand how to play every role: witness, victim, friend. Graves leaned on the rail beside him. So that's it, then, Graves said. Bellamy discovered the lighthouse logs. Thought he could blackmail his way out of debt. Sent letters to Rowan and perhaps even Calder. But the person truly orchestrating the smuggling wasn't willing to be controlled. Just so, Poirot replied. Robert Finch posed as the harmless one, the young man who knew nothing. He relied on the fact that people underestimate youth. But he also made a mistake. Graves grunted. The cufflink? Poirot nodded. Oui, Naderalmung, a small thing easily lost. But nothing is small to Hercule Poirot. He paused, watching a wave crash particularly hard against the rocks below. Rowan and Calder, Poirot continued. They were guilty, yes, but of cowardice more than malice. They turned a blind eye to the smuggling in exchange for coin. They allowed the logs to be falsified and the harbor to be used at night. But it was Robert who saw how to use it all, how to profit the most, and how to remove Bellamy when he became inconvenient. And Hargreaves? Graves asked. He's a brute, but he didn't kill anyone. No, Poirot said quietly. He was merely loud. And in being loud, he made himself the perfect decoy for the real killer. Robert allowed Hargreaves' temper to distract everyone. He planned for anger to be the first suspect, so that logic would arrive later. Graves sighed. I'll still charge him for threats and intimidation. But murder? No, that belongs to Finch. Poirot looked along the length of the pier. Tides change, Inspector. And so do men. Or their masks. He straightened. And Madame Bellamy? Poirot asked. Is she? Heartbroken, Graves said. But grateful. She knows now that her husband wasn't killed over some hidden affair or scandalous secret. It was greed. Cold, simple greed. Poirot's expression softened. Greed is rarely simple, mon ami. It breeds desperation. Desperation breeds violence. A gust of wind swept past them, rattling the lantern hooks and tugging at Poirot's coat. Graves cleared his throat. You know, the inspector said, people around here, they'll remember this. Not just what happened, but how it was solved. Poirot raised a brow. Ah, they will speak kindly of Inspector Graves? Graves smirked. Hopefully. But they'll definitely speak of a little Belgian with a magnificent mustache. Poirot's mustache twitched upward at the corners. It is fortunate for them, then, that my mustache travels. Graves laughed for the first time since the murder. Down on the rocks, a fisherman began his work, casting a net into the water as though nothing had changed. Children chased each other along the safer parts of the harbor, their laughter faint but real. Life, relentless as the sea, moved forward. Poirot glanced toward the path leading up to the village. I must pay one more visit, he said, to Madame Bellamy before I depart. Graves nodded. I'll walk with you part of the way. They left the pier behind. As they walked, Poirot looked back once. The wooden structure rose over the sea like an old witness finally heard. No longer just the scene of a murder, but the scene of truth revealed. Eleanor Bellamy greeted Poirot at the door, her eyes weary but clearer than before. She stepped aside for him to enter. The house smelled faintly of tea and old books. Mr. Poirot, she said softly, they told me the man who killed my husband has confessed. To some degree, yes, Poirot replied gently. He admits to the struggle, though, as always, He blames the circumstance more than himself. But the law will not be so forgiving. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, but she did not break this time. Was Thomas afraid? Poirot took a seat opposite her. Yes, he said honestly. He was desperate. He tried to use the secret he discovered as a shield blackmailing those involved, believing it would protect him. But, madame, such shields are made of glass. They shatter easily. Eleanor closed her eyes. He was a good man who made a foolish choice, Poirot continued. He wanted to save you. The shops. The reputation. But he chose a dangerous path. She nodded shakily. He thought if he could pay back what he owed, everything would return to normal. Poirot folded his hands. In matters of money and morality, he said softly, people often forget that one can be honest, even when poor. Eleanor let out a fragile sigh. But do not let his final mistake erase all he was before. A husband. A man who loved the sea and this village. Hold on to those truths, madame, not only to the tragedy. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. Thank you, Mr. Poirot. He stood. If you need anything, he said, Inspector Graves is at your service. And though I may not be here, my mustache is famous enough that you may send it a letter. She laughed through her tears. I'll remember that. Poirot tipped his hat and left. Later that afternoon, as the sky began to lighten with hints of weak sunlight, Poirot stood at the edge of the village, suitcase beside him, waiting for the carriage that would take him to the nearest station. Evelyn Shore. The schoolteacher approached quietly. Mr. Poirot, she called. He turned. Mademoiselle, I wanted to say, thank you, she said. You believed me. When I said I heard them on the pier. When I said there was a third person. Most people dismiss what women see and hear, especially in the fog. Poirot inclined his head. It is often the overlooked eye that observes the most. You were brave, mademoiselle. Remember that. She blushed slightly. Will you ever come back to Sablewind? Poirot looked toward the pier from which so much sorrow had risen and been resolved. Perhaps, he murmured, if the sea calls again. But I prefer places where the ground is less slippery and the crimes less damp. A small smile curved her lips. Safe travels, Mr. Poirot. He nodded. The carriage arrived, wheels crunching over gravel. Poirot stepped in, settled his hat, and placed his suitcase beside him. As they moved away from Sablewind Village, he leaned slightly toward the window, watching as the pier grew smaller in the distance, its shadow stretching over the sea one last time. Murder beneath the shadows of Sablewind Pier, he said softly to himself. A tragedy of greed, fear, and desperate men. But in the end, the sea gives up its secrets, and so must we all. The village vanished from sight. The road ahead curved inland, away from the crashing waves into greener lands and quieter crimes. But somewhere in the far distance, the sound of the ocean still murmured behind him, not as a threat now, but as a memory. And Hercule Poirot, satisfied that justice had been carried in with the tide, closed his eyes for a brief moment of rest before the next mystery found him. before the next mystery found him.